There are some people who walk into your life for a season, and some who shape your life without even knowing it. I taught math for 31 years, thousands of students, thousands of faces. There are a few who still live vividly in my nervous system, who I can see, feel, and remember exactly as they were. Today's guest is one of those people. When Chanel O'Brien walked into my classroom as a teenager, she did not just show up physically. She showed up energetically, fully present, fully engaged, fully alive in my classroom. She made eye contact. She laughed at my stories. She asked questions. She responded. She was on every single day. And if you've ever been a teacher, you know how rare that is. How exhausting it can be to give energy all day long, and how rare it is when someone gives it back. I still remember one snowy day when school was closed. Chanel emailed me and asked if she could come over and take my 3 little boys out to play. She brought me my favorite hot chai drink, and for a couple of hours, I sat inside warm and grateful while this high school student gave me the best gift. Can we just pause for a moment? What
Yeah.
high school kid gives up sleeping in on a snow day and laying around in their pajamas, maybe binge watching some Netflix, scrolling through their phone just to do something kind for someone else? And what teenager is that attuned to someone else that knows my drink without even asking me? So
I remember that. I remember that like it was yesterday.
even then, I knew she was going to be extraordinary. Years later, when I wrote my first published book and was choosing who I wanted to write the foreword, I didn't think about titles or credentials first. I thought about who had truly seen me as a teacher and as a mom. And Chanel was it. The moment I thought of her, I knew in my soul it was the right decision. Today, she is an emergency room physician and a medical director. She has traveled, she's trained, she's sacrificed, she has chosen hard things, and she has built a life that looks impressive on paper and meaningful in real life. This conversation isn't about becoming a doctor, it's about becoming, about the 1.0 to the 2.0 to the 2.2 version of yourself, about discipline when no one is watching, about staying present through long seasons of uncertainty, and about choosing growth over comfort. I'm Carrie, and this is Project U 2.2, where we explore the psychology, courage, and identity shifts behind real transformation. And today, I get to sit down with someone who reminds me that the seeds we plant quietly in classrooms, in conversations, in ordinary days, sometimes grow into the most powerful lives. This is Chanel O'Brien. Welcome.
I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I am thrilled. I've been so excited, just looking forward to this conversation with you. And I can't remember if I started doing Hot Seat when I had you as a student in class. Do you remember?
I don't think we did Hot Seat. And I know that
Okay.
you mentioned Netflix earlier, but I don't even think Netflix was around when I was in high school.
I was thinking
We're
that
like
too.
really
In fact,
aging myself here.
right. In fact, even like cell phones, like, yeah, I think those were just maybe.
Oh yeah. I had like a flip phone back then.
Nice. So, as I evolved in my teaching to get to know each other better, I would put students in the hot seat and I would ask them in the class, we would ask them 22 questions.
Oh my gosh,
And so
okay.
I'm not going to ask you 22, but we're going to start with just a few, just so people can get to know you. So, are you ready for the hot seat?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. All right. Last show you binged.
Oh, I jumped on the bandwagon with this one, Heated Rivalry.
Oh, I've never even heard of it. Is that on Netflix?
Oh my gosh, no, it's on HBO. It's pretty spicy, but like surprisingly very sweet, very like loving story with like a slight touch of hockey. But it's
Okay.
it's good. It was very good.
Okay. Greg and I have just binged Doc. Have you seen that? That's right up your
No.
alley. Oh.
No. It's everyone thinks that I watch a lot of medical shows or like everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, have you watched The Pit?" And I'm like, "No, I can't. I can't do it. It
Mhm.
reminds me too much of work." I'm like, "I can't relax watching that."
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I get that, I get it. So how about best vacation ever?
Oh, that was probably my honeymoon that I took with Lauren, and we went to the Maldives, and we did, like, bucket list, like, bungalow over the water, absolutely gorgeous, like, 100% coolest vacation I've taken.
I've never been there. Sounds amazing.
I mean, the trek in and of itself was I think it took us, like, 30 something hours to get there. Yeah, it's
Wow.
but it was incredible, like, I've never seen water so blue in my entire life. It was
Mm,
very cool.
and that's coming from a girl who's from South Africa, so that sounds
Yes.
amazing. Yes, yes.
Yes,
All
this
right,
was next level.
introvert or extrovert?
Ooh, so back in high school, 100% extrovert, like no questions asked. That would have been the easy answer. But I think as I've gotten older, I've actually turned into a little bit more of an introvert. So I think now I'm a little bit more introverted.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
know.
would have
It is
preferred
interesting.
nailed you had you as a you were a leader, very extrovert. Do you think sometimes that just comes from you're so busy and on all day long in your job that your nervous system needs a little reset?
I don't know, maybe as I've gotten, like, a little bit older, I've kinda just, like, settled into just, like, trying to listen a little bit more, and so because of that, I've just kind of tried to switch my mindset, but I don't feel too burned out from work, so I don't think it's necessarily that I'm, like,
Mhm,
not being
mhm.
able to, like, engage because of that. I think it's more so just I feel like I don't have as m much to say or, like, what I'm saying is not as important as maybe, like, what other people could be saying, you know?
Mm. I would challenge that because I feel like you are full of wonderful things, but I do think you're right that as we get older, we learn that to be confident isn't being in the spotlight, but it's
Yes.
about bringing out the best of others and asking people questions. So I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. What's one word that your friends would use to describe you?
Ooh, probably dependable. If somebody needs something or, like, needs to know that, like, something needs to be done, like, I'm probably the person I'm probably the person they'll reach out to.
Mhm. Which is why you're on my podcast right now, right?
Right, exactly, here I am.
What is something that people assume about doctors that's totally wrong?
Probably that we know everything because we do know some stuff, but, in real life, like, we're just trying to make it through and also taking time to go look things up, and I think that's probably the biggest misconception is that we're, like, have everything together, but we're just kinda
Mhm.
moving through life just like everybody else.
I remember once when I heard somebody say, like, "Doctors practice medicine," because we're always learning and there's so much to learn that you're just
Yes,
practicing. So, how
always.
about something that you are super competitive about?
Think when I was younger, I was very competitive, whether it was, like, sports or with my brother, but I feel like I'm actually not very competitive anymore, which is strange to say, but I feel like I'm not. Maybe, like, with myself, I'm competitive, but I don't find I'm competitive with, like, other people.
I think that's how I always saw you as a student. In the classroom, on the soccer field, wherever you were whatever you were doing, you were very competitive with yourself.
Yes, I think I've always probably been, like, my hardest critic, for
Mhm.
sure. So I'd say that's probably still the case. Just, like, internal goals that I have, more so I'm competitive with myself of, like, "Okay, what's next? What else can we do?" You can, like, start comparing yourself. When you start comparing yourself, there's just no benefit in that.
That's such a great topic, and that is actually one thing I wanna get into later with you about a young girl that I'm coaching, and so often I think as we're younger, that whole comparison and there's the quote in fact, one of my podcasts I did was "Comparison is the thief of joy," and it is, it's that nasty spiral that you can really
Mhm.
always find someone who's better than you and compare, and you're not looking at a 360-degree lens of them, you're micro focusing on one thing and
100%.
okay, I
Yeah.
wanna start back before your white coat, before all the letters after your name, and
Yeah.
before people called you doctor, which is a huge accomplishment. I wanna just go back to when you were a teenager in my
Mhm.
classroom. Would you have guessed at 16 years old, at 17 years old, that you would be where you are right now?
Not, like, specifically would I be a doctor? I don't No one in my family is a doctor. Like medicine itself was not like something that I'd always like known I wanted to do. But I do feel like I knew I was going to be successful in whatever I did just because I knew again that like competitiveness with myself. I didn't picture myself necessarily like as a doctor.
Mhm, mhm. When you think back to when you were in high school, you were of 31 years, and I used you every single year. I still use you as an example when I'm coaching teens. You were so engaged. You were alive. Was that natural for you, or is that something that you had to consciously choose and work at?
Oh, that's a really good question. I feel like I did have to choose it to a point until it kind of, I think, just became more of like a habit to be that engaged because it's almost like harder to go through high school or anything if you're going through the motions or you're not really in it. My parents definitely instilled in me like, listen, you if you're going to do something, you show up and you make it worth your time. And so I think they like were a good driving force through like those early years of like really instilling good work ethic more than anything and showing up and again like being present. I mean, your class was also just amazing, right? Like you were the kind of teacher that like when you showed up, I wanted to give you what, like, you were giving me, right? Like, you showed up 100% every single day, and you wanna give that back, and so I think that's something that I think is partly learned from, like, my family and upbringing, but part of it is just, like, I think that's just how I am a little bit.
Yeah, even just your eye contact, and it's funny, I actually have another podcast that's you're in the back of my mind when I wrote it, and it's coming up, but it's about how I could take you and place you in the back of the room. And it started out where I loved you in the front because I could feel your energy and I could thrive off that. But then I could move you in the back and you wouldn't let anybody distract you. Like that energy between us would literally create this magic that sucked everybody in between us and just made the whole environment better. And
I
so
remember being in the back of the room, now I know why.
yes, it's so rare.
But, also for me at least, like, I knew I wanted to get good grades, like, that was one of the expectations of me a little bit, like, you have to get good grades, and for me, I'm like, I really don't think I'm like a naturally smart, gifted person. I'm the kind of person that like I did well in math because I had to pay attention. I wasn't just going to like skate through and get an A. So part of it is like because of those expectations, I knew I had to focus. And I think that was probably also a driving force.
Yeah, I do think there's a difference though. Some people come in and they focus and they're very into their own learning, but they don't give back like you give back. So when are there teachers or maybe moments throughout your maybe just high school or college experience that shaped your decision to maybe change your path?
So I remember going like starting at Michigan State and I kind of just started with like, my basic gen eds through like the first 2 years because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was even late into the game to like applying to med school. And a lot of it, I'm sure we'll touch on, it was kind of just like the doubt that came with applying to medical school. And I think that kind of just like held me back a little bit. So, class that I took that everyone was like, man, this is such a tough class. And I remember finishing that class and I was like, I loved that class. Everything clicked and it was physiology. This anatomy professor that I had, and she also taught at the med school. And she's like, if you can do that class and you really like that, you need to seriously consider applying to med school. So she was kind of the one that was, yeah, that is like equivalent to what a med school class would be. So like if you like that, do it.
Mhm. If you could go back and talk to your 18-year-old self, maybe warn her, what would you tell her not to fear?
Don't fear the unknown or like what the future necessarily is going to be because you really can't control that. Like things are going to happen and you just have to expect that things are going to show up in your life that like might deflect you off of your path for a little bit, right? But sometimes that deflection can actually be like, and it's okay to like maybe get off track for a little bit as long as you still kind of have like your end goal. Like, what do you, because I think if you ultimately have that like at least guiding light, it's okay to be, like I said, taken off track a little bit. You can always get back on, or like I said, maybe it takes you into like a whole nother direction that you weren't really expecting to go in. But it's also, I wish I could tell myself like it's okay to fail because you can't go through life when you are so obsessed with being like perfect, right? Or like things have to go as planned. You just get more rattled when things don't go your way. And so I think a lot of the learning that I've gotten to do, or like some of the development that I think I've gone through and growth, is because either I didn't do something well and I kind of had to like adjust and again like figure out what can I do to like either get back to where I want, or what can I do to get better and get to my goal. That's just, it's okay to fail, right? Like I wish I could just tell myself like you're going to fail, it's going to happen. The most important part is like, okay, how do you react to that? How do you not let that like take you away from still getting to where you want to be? That's probably what I would want to tell my younger self, is that perfection is not the goal.
That's such great advice. And I think during those times that we fail or those experiences that we go through, it hurts, it
Mhm.
challenges us, but it's where probably the most growth comes from, and it's where you kind of find out what you're made out of, and you're right, sometimes those experiences change our path, and maybe that's better for us, the path that,
Mhm.
has so going through those experiences or those failures end up, when you look back, being a blessing. Mhm.
100%. And also, like, if you think about it, like, if something's so easy and you get to the end, I don't know, it doesn't feel as good, you know? Like, it's kinda nice to, like, feel like you've gone through some grit and some tears and some, blood, sweat, and tears to get where you are. It just makes it that much more worth it.
Yeah, makes the journey. Yeah, I think it probably gives you pride and builds your confidence, which seems a little bit weird.
100%.
hmm
Yeah.
When people hear doctor, they imagine success, like, oh, she has it together, and a
Right.
female in the medical world. So, what did discipline actually look like in real life to get you there?
Man, discipline I is boring. Like, it is. Like, and it should be, right? Because, like, to be disciplined, it's a very unsexy thing to be disciplined, because a lot of it is just kind of doing the same monotonous routine habit actions over and over and over again. And so, discipline for me kind of was like making sure that I showed up every single day to class, even when you don't want to do it, right? But staying
Mhm.
up really late. I remember, we would have our exams, I think at like 7 a.m. I would force myself to get up at 4:30 or 5 just to kind of quickly review buzzwords, things that, like, I was just like, "Ugh, I keep forgetting this, I need it in my brain." And, like, even, like, something small like that would end up getting me, like, a couple more points on the test, but, like, it ended up making a really big difference. Discipline is also just having to say no to things, right? And having to prioritize what you're trying to accomplish. So, I had to say no to a lot of family events sometimes, and miss parties, and miss out on some vacations with friends, but again, it's like if you can do that kind of hard work, it ends up ultimately getting you to the goal that you've set for yourself. But I think overall, I mean, like I said, discipline is just it's easy in conversation, but to actually show up every single day, like you said, like be engaged and show up, that does take a lot of work, but that is what you need to sometimes be successful and get where you need to go.
Mhm. I love that whole story you just painted because I think it could be applied to anything, even if it was weight loss or,
Mhm.
going after a career. When you talk about doing the same boring things, when I worked on my weight loss journey, it was eating, it wasn't sexy. And you're so right. It was
It's not,
eating the
yeah.
same thing every day, being consistent, showing up, sacrificing things at parties, sacrificing just different
Mhm.
where you just had to be very disciplined. But when you get to that end goal of your weight loss or your career and the degrees you want, you look back and the journey was definitely worth it to get you there. In that messy middle, sometimes you have doubt. And I'm sure, like you shared earlier, you have those failures. And so it isn't this linear process that you go through. There's that, one of my key messages in my podcast and my coaching is that whole messy middle of life that we
Mhm.
don't like, but it's there, and that's where we grow. Mhm,
That's where all the growth happens, is in that messy middle, right? And so I think about, the journey of like starting undergrad to then starting residency and then being done, like that was 12 years, right? And so to think about like a goal 12 years ahead is too long to think about starting in med school or undergrad to be like, okay, I can't wait for 12 years from now, right? Like you have to put these smaller, more attainable goals as these like little treats kind of along the way. Let's just get into med school. Let's get through this semester. Let's get into residency. So it's like all these like small things along the way that you have to break it up like that because if you just think of like this one long-term goal and you can't even see the end of it, you you like don't see that guiding light, right? So you need these like small little beacons kind of on your way there to like keep you guided. Everyone always asked me, they're like, "How'd you get through med school?" Or like, "How'd you do that? That's so takes so much discipline." And I was like, "Because it was boring." Like you said, if you eat your broccoli and chicken, like 3 or 4 times a week, you are going to see results. And it's in those like small moments that ultimately get you to the end goal.
That's so interesting because I think so many people look at the schooling that's involved with being anything in that elite of a career with like as a doctor or an attorney. I know our youngest
Mhm.
son is thinking about becoming an attorney and he's in his freshman year of college and he's like, "Oh, I don't know if I can go to school that long." But you're right. It's one of those things that it goes by at the end. You're like, "That wasn't so bad. I made it." And you probably learn how to become a
Mhm.
professional student at that point.
Mhm.
And it's the same with like weight loss, where you're like, oh, it looks so hard. And you have to break it down into, okay, I'm in this decade, or this 10 pounds, and getting to those certain milestones where you do take time to reward yourself and celebrate
Mhm.
your wins. But it is, I mean, that's 12 years is incredible. And it's
Yeah.
almost one of those things that's unattainable, when you're in it. And I
Right.
remember even working on my bachelor's degree and my mom saying, because even that sometimes can be overwhelming, and my mom telling me the
Yeah.
same thing you said, one class at a time, one semester
Mhm.
at a time, and instead of looking too far out and where it
Yeah.
just seems impossible. Mhm.
Yeah. And I think when people, they'll be like, it's too far, or like if they're kind of like a little bit later in life, and like they want to go back to school or something, they're like, well, I'm going to be 38 when I'm done. I'm like, yeah, but that time is going to pass whether you're changing your career or not. So like, do you want to be 38 and now have your new degree, or do you want to be 38 and still just stuck doing what you want to do, right? Time will is going to pass no matter what. So it's like never too late to start something.
Mhm, mhm, yeah, I agree, for me and I keep going back to the weight because I think that's such a big thing for people too,
Yeah.
but, like, it's one of those things where I would say choose your heart. It's hard to be overweight, and it's hard to stay disciplined, so
Mhm.
choose your heart, and the same with you for your schooling. It's hard to go to all those classes and to show up every day and to go to school for 12 years, but it would have been hard to give up on your dreams and to not do something that
Mhm.
gives you that fulfillment. So you
Yeah.
definitely use that discipline just to push through those challenges and sometimes I would say complete discomfort as you go
Yeah,
through that. Okay, let's
for
talk about
sure.
that whole messy middle part. So was there
Yeah.
ever a moment when you thought, "I don't know if I can actually do this?"
Oh, yeah, there's too many to count, honestly. So, I feel like those moments of kind of like doubt or messy middle always happen like as you're about to start something new, right? Or like you're about to take that next step because you've kind of maybe plateaued, gotten comfy, and then it's like, okay, oh, nope, new responsibility, next thing. The first doubt I had was probably even just like applying to med school. I remember I took the MCAT and I got like the lowest score you were allowed to get to even apply to medical school. I remember taking that and I was like, "Oh, this is not good. I'm not gonna get in here." But I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get good letters of recommendation. I know my grades are good. Let's focus on that." And I was late getting into med school. I mean, I was still successful. I still got through and I actually ended up really graduating like in like I think like the top 10% of my class or something like that. I try and tell people that are, thinking about going to med school or doing like any test that they have to take or anything that they're thinking about. One specific aspect of it is not going to like make or break you. Everyone has things that they're good at, things that they're bad at. That test was not my jam. Kind of like the first messy start to med school. And then another part of the doubt or just kind of like the next step was with just getting into residency. So kind of like as we get through med school, you have to kind of figure out, okay, what do you want to specialize in? Where are you going to go? And that can be like a pretty competitive and cutthroat process a little bit. A lot of people were kind of discouraging me from like the way that I was going to rank my programs because one of them was out in Philly and that's like a pretty competitive area and there were a lot of applicants that year, but I just had like a really good gut feeling after leaving that interview and I'm going to trust myself on this one. A lot of people sowed some doubt. They're like, I think you need to rank more programs. Like, I don't think you can bank on this, but I kind of just I went for it and it ended up working okay, but I'm glad I did, right? I'm glad I listened to myself in that, not being like just taking kind of the easy way out where I knew that I was like automatically going to maybe get into some other programs. And then honestly, the messiest year probably for me was just the first year of being an attending. That is such a tough year. It was just like it was a year where I just felt anxious and the most significant imposter syndrome ever. It was just such a challenge. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, things are going to get so much easier once I'm attending. Like, this is what I've worked for." It's like, again, like you think 12 years in advance and you're like, once I get that done, life is easy. No, that was the hardest year for me. And it was just like, it kind of like took me back a little bit because I was just expecting things to maybe get a little bit easier, get a little bit lighter. And no, that year I ended up in therapy and there was a lot of doubt and a lot of imposter syndrome of like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do this. Like this is really scary. There's a lot of pressure." And so that year was just that was a really tough year for me.
I love your realness, and I think that's one thing that just I always have loved about you. It is so true. Like those I remember my first year teaching, like you think, "Okay, I made it through all of that and I student taught," but then to have a classroom on your own and I mean, I would stay till 9 at night just practicing the lesson and teaching it out loud because then you knew you had to be at your best because there are other things to
Mhm.
deal with. Their student behaviors, there are
Mhm.
students not listening. And so I can't imagine taking that to a whole new level where it's like literally life or death for people that you are dealing with.
I know, and it was you don't kind of realize it 'cause you always had someone kind of above you, like, at least you had the idea of, like, someone's watching over you. Someone's, like, not gonna let you mess up or do something that you shouldn't do, but then, like, when that's taken away, that was, "Oh, oh, this is, like, very
This
scary,
is adulting
very real."
now.
100%, and it's almost like I honestly that I, like, lost some confidence that year a little bit just because I was just second guessing myself on like everything that I felt like I was really confident on. I really had to kind of work on finding that sense of, no, I do know what I'm doing. I need to like trust myself.
I love that you shared the imposter syndrome because people like look and think, "Oh, she's a doctor. She's got it all together. She's confident." That imposter syndrome shows up no matter what age we are, but it
Hmm.
happens when we're growing, when we're pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, when we're doing something. So for maybe some young listeners who are where you were back at in high school, just take us through the straight career path, like what that looks like starting at first out of high school.
Typically, so I went to Michigan State for undergrad, and so undergrad is obviously 4 years. I took a year off actually between undergrad and med school just because I was nervous that if I just went straight into that, I wasn't giving myself like a mental break. So my journey was like a little bit longer, but then started in med school, which is 4 years as well. After med school, then you go to residency, and that's where things are a little bit variable. Some residencies are 3 years, some are four, some are all the way up to like 5 or 6 years. So it can be even a longer journey than my 12.
Also appreciated you sharing that when you took your MCAT, you got the lowest possible score. And I have
Yeah.
had several students, former students, who have taken it and haven't passed it and have had to
Yeah.
take it multiple times. And so, besides that, can you think of a specific moment? Because that wasn't a failure. Maybe in your mind, you were like, whew, I barely made it, but I made it.
Yeah.
So, a specific time or moment where you failed, maybe it was an exam or a rotation or a patient that maybe almost broke you.
When we have to like do procedures, there's procedures like you're not going to get it right the first time, and then it's also nervous to do procedures on like a human person. And something pretty simple that we do are just like these using an ultrasound to get an IV. Like just say the nurses can't get it, and it's a little bit of like a tougher one. And I remember I had to do like 40 of these. I missed 40 in a row before I got it, and then after that, I got like every single one after that. Those 40 felt like I was just like, "I'm never gonna get this, like, I'm not going to be able to do this." But then it was just kind of like I sought out areas where I could practice, right? So, like, maybe a a patient that was intubated, and I would be able to kind of take my time a little bit with it. So that just felt really discouraging because again, some people just got it boom like that. Like it was no problem for them. And I'm just like, struggling along. But now it's like one of the things that I'm probably best at.
I was actually thinking that. I'm going to say that
Yeah.
you had so much repetition and so much
Yeah.
practice, and you didn't give up, and you just pushed, and very
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
So I keep thinking as I'm listening to you talking about a 13-year-old that I am coaching right now and working on her confidence and all of the negative voices that we hear in our side of our own head, like, oh,
Hmm.
I don't want to walk through the cafeteria because everyone's looking at me and everyone's judging me. And I don't think it's just a teen thing. I think it happens to us all the time. I remember
Absolutely.
every school year, I would hardly sleep the night before the first day because I knew I had to stand in front of hundreds of students that next day, teenagers who are super judgy, and you'd see them looking
Yeah.
you up and down. And so you have that self-doubt or some fear when you feel like the spotlight is on you. And for us, sometimes it literally is. But for
Yeah.
the 13-year-olds, walking to go sharpen their pencil, maybe a little bit people are looking, but I think it's this invisible spotlight that we think
Hmm.
people are looking at and judging us more than they are. So if you could sit next to that 13-year-old as she prepares to walk through the cafeteria with that fear, what would you tell
Yeah.
her?
Think about how you go about your day. Most of the time, you're focused on yourself and no one else.
Mhm,
People are the same way. They're thinking mostly about probably themselves and not necessarily someone walking past them, right? So like it's again, it's that internal spotlight where you feel everyone's watching you or everyone's listening to what you're saying or you're going to sound stupid. But for the most part, people are kind of self-absorbed and they're really just thinking about how they are being perceived. And so everyone's kind of in their own head. And so you'd actually be surprised by how little people are actually kind of paying attention to that type of stuff.
mhm,
Perfect example is like I just tried starting doing yoga again. So I started going to like a yoga studio, and all I can think about is like, oh my God, everyone in this room is watching me and how bad my down dog is or downward dog, you know? I'm like, this is just so embarrassing. Then you look around and everyone's like head down doing their thing. Like nobody's actually looking at you. You kind of have to give yourself some grace, take some pressure off, and just realize like everyone's just kind of almost got their own blinders on. And for the most part, no one's actually paying as much attention as you think.
mhm. That's such great advice, and you're right. Self-absorbed is it's a little bit sad that humans are like
It's
that.
sad, but it's so true.
I
Oh
think
my
it is
gosh.
one of those things when you talk about self-absorbed, when you take a picture of a group, and when people look at the photo, they zoom in on themselves first because they're checking
100%, right?
themselves. Yeah.
Yep. You get a
Mhm.
group photo and they're like, "Hey, let me look at that." And boop, everyone's zooming in to be like, "Oh yeah, okay, I look good." Nobody's looking at anybody else.
Right, yep, that's the one that you can post on social media because
Yeah,
I look
exactly.
good.
Okay, that looks good. Yep.
When you look at the path and your journey to become I'm so proud of you, an emergency
Oh.
room doctor. I
Yeah.
remember you being so excited to go to Philadelphia to do that work, and
Yes.
then I remember you talking about taking on this traveling job, and you were
Mm.
excited because the traveling benefits were fun, and, you didn't have kids, and it was a great time to just travel, and the financial piece was also just exciting to do.
Mhm.
So, what ultimately led you back close to home?
I realized that yes, I was getting more money and like that was nice, right? But I felt like what I was sacrificing from more so like my personal life, like it was really hard to be away from family, and, like, my pets, for, like, a full week and then come back, and I just felt like I was really cramming everything that I needed into these, like, short stints, and so I felt like I never really got to relax, right? I was either at work and then I came home and I felt like I had this, like, countdown in my head. I'm like, "Okay, I gotta go to work in a week, but I have to see my mom, I have to see my dad, I have to go" Lauren and I need to go do these things around the house, and so I felt like I was just, like, never able to actually just relax. And so I think that just toll on me. I was like, "That's not it's just not worth what I thought was important," which at first was the money,
Mhm,
which,
mhm,
there were great benefits from that, but, I'm so much happier now that I'm just in
mhm.
one spot.
Mhm. It is interesting how our lens of what success is changes.
Mhm.
And I love that came to that more balanced at your young age. And I think there's a difference between building a life that looks good and building a life that just feels like you're centered in your home. And I didn't realize until much later in my life, and wish I would have realized it earlier, that how important it is your decisions and what you're doing really affect your nervous system. And
Oh
so
my
just
gosh, so much,
yeah.
so much. Like, I feel so much lighter in, like, the last year. It's it's just, like, noticeable. Like, just every aspect of my life since I kind of went away from traveling, I don't think I realized how much it was stressing me out. But also, again, I was saying, that year was really tough. I was really struggling with, again, imposter syndrome. It was just really scary, and then to leave work and come to a hotel room where, like, I was just by myself, that was not good for my mental health either. Once you kind of, again, free up that, like, nervous system and you're not at this, like, constant state of, like, buzzing,
Mm.
you can actually take a breath and be like, "Okay, everything is just easier."
I do get that because as a mom, another one of my podcasts was about how busy and how all this magic we try to make at Christmas, and we're cooking and we're doing all this stuff, and then it's over and you're exhausted and you didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so just pausing your nervous system and just enjoying the moment, which is what you get to
Mhm.
do now. I mean, I'm sure your life, you still feel like you're buzzing at times, but it isn't this constant buzz. So,
Yeah.
mhm,
And that's so funny that you say that because we just had Christmas. I had to remind my mom, like, just come sit. It's okay if the kitchen's dirty for an hour or two, just like come join us. Because I think that's a mom thing, right? You just want everything to be taken care of. That comes with its own sense of expectations.
I think, yes, so often we're trying to create magic for everyone else that we miss it. And so to
Mhm.
remind ourselves just to that will wait, even though it feels like it's urgent right then,
Mhm.
you learn after so many of those days that, "Oh, I just missed it. Everybody else got to have those fun conversations,
Mhm.
and I missed it." So, okay,
Yeah.
I wanna dive into the emergency room because for me, this is
Okay.
exciting, and this is I have my TV lens, then with the real life lens, which is, like,
Mhm.
terrible, obviously, if you're in there. I was just in with one of my sons, and that's the scary part. So, I want to start with, how does working in the ER just maybe change how you see people?
Oh man, the ER is a place where I think you just see like the vast badness and the best of like humanity. There are sometimes that you see the most thoughtful, caring instances of somebody like helping others, so selfless. But then there are other times where you just see areas of our society that I think are just hidden or in the shadows when we get patients that just really need support, whether it's trying to get on insurance or get out of like an abusive relationship or get out of substance use issues, right? Like we see that a lot. A lot of what we deal with is honestly like social stuff, and people end up in the ER because sometimes they don't have anywhere else to go. I think like the hardest part is just seeing that like we really do have a lack of resources for these folks, and sometimes that takes a toll on me. And like if people can't get home, I'm ordering them an Uber from like my own phone because I'm like I just like I cannot physically just like let this person go without somewhere safe to be. But I think that's been the hardest part is like, okay, how do we navigate and get the people like as much resources to change their lives as they can? Sometimes you just end up seeing the same people come back and they haven't changed, and so it's hard to see returning customers, I guess you could call
Mhm.
them, where you've like tried to make some actual change. You can't ultimately change people, which is
Right.
a lesson I've learned. But then, you also see like some really great selflessness. Like I said, we recently had a patient that we took care of, and they got injured, but they were injured because there was another car accident, and they like had put themselves in danger to go help this family out of this like wrecked car. You also see like just some really wholesome stuff in the ER. It's also, I think, just changed my perception of like, I think because sometimes what we do is like truly life or death, right? Like you have to make a decision. So I definitely think I've become a little bit more like decisive in life. Sometimes Lauren will like take a really long time and be really thoughtful about things that we want to do to the house and like paint colors and all this kind of stuff. And she's like, "Well, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Oh, just pick this one." And she's like, "How'd you do that so fast? Like, why did you didn't even look at all the options?" And so sometimes I feel like I'm just like almost like too decisive sometimes because I'm just like so in that mindset. It's a great place to work. Like you just really see like all walks of life, and I really appreciate that.
You remind me when you talk about that, I never really had made the connection about teaching and how you work hard to save some students. And sometimes you do make a difference. And other times,
Hmm.
they keep coming back with those same issues and they have their environment and their circumstances that are
Hmm.
so hard to fight against. And so it's the same, I think, with you. And it also just when I told you, Greg and I have been watching Doc, and we have been just our eyes have been opened, and we're like, wait, is this really TV emergency room or is this real life? And we would see these doctors doing so much more than medicine, this counseling and helping people through problems and connecting family members who are in the
Hmm.
room. And so just listening to this little bit that you've shared makes me think that maybe that is actually more real because we're like, doctors have so many, and I always think the same about teachers, like so many more jobs than just.
So many more jobs, right?
Mhm.
And like you also just never know what's actually going on in people's lives. Somebody could come in and you think they are this super successful person. They look like they have everything together and then you kind of like slowly kind of unravel and you're like this person's actually really struggling. Can't make assumptions. You can't assume what somebody's going through. And I think that's just really been something that I've like really taken even outside of work.
Mhm. When you see people come into the emergency room, what are some things that you're like, this is not really an emergency?
Honestly, like 80% of what we see is not an emergency. No, I mean, I tell people ER is probably like 80% just urgent care stuff. People are coming with like maybe they have pneumonia, sore throat, maybe they broke a bone. Oh, like not that that's not serious. And then, the other 20%, like all hands on deck, like we have to do something now or this person's gonna not make it. It's not like the pit where like it's just constant chaos all the time. Like, yeah, sometimes shifts are just like you leave and you're like, whoa, that was a lot.
When you look at like a sign that you would want people to know about, this is when you need to go to the ER, what would it be?
That's a good question. I feel like those Apple Watches are pretty helpful when people are like, "Oh yeah, my heart rate went up to like the 160s or 170s." I'm like, "Yeah, that's not good. You should come into the ER." I pretty much tell somebody, like if you are ever questioning it, just go to the ER. Like you'd rather just be safe than sorry. There's too many times where people are like, "Well, I had chest pain last week and I kind of just ignored it." And then next thing you know, they're like in and they have this like huge heart attack. It's like you don't want to you still have to keep an eye on things, and it's worth getting investigated if it's a problem that, keeps coming up.
Mhm. So besides like maybe elevated heart rate, can you think of maybe like 2 to 3 things that people just try to ignore and it ends up go into emergency because of it?
Yeah. I would say people okay, so, like, obviously chest pain is a big one. If someone's feeling short of breath and they, like, look like they're really breathing fast or kinda turning blue, like, those are people that you should definitely go in. For kiddos, like, any kid with, like, really, high fevers, like 103, 104, that's kind of lasting, like, they definitely need to go be seen. A big one that I think people ignore is, like, after they travel, I think people just, like, forget that you can get a blood clot, and so people will come in and, like, they have this huge blood clot in their leg after like they either went on like a long distance trip or like a car ride and they kind of just ignore it because they think, oh, it's like a muscle cramp or something, but those can be really serious. And so I tell people, I'm like, yeah, if you've been on like a long car ride and your leg is swollen and hurt, like you need to go in.
Mm. Good to know. Yeah, very
Yeah.
good to know. When I flew to Greece and Italy last summer, I was very worried about that, and so I did, like, the
Yeah.
compression socks
Yes,
and
yeah, I tell people to do that all the time.
mhm.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most unexpected, not like classical textbook, just skill that makes someone a good emergency room doctor?
I tell this to like all of the residents coming in is like you will learn medicine. You'll get the knowledge that you need. You have to have the things that like you cannot really teach, and that's just to show up on time, to be prepared, right? You might not know the answers, but just be prepared and just be nice. Like be a kind human being. Nothing makes me more upset like when we have like a medical student or a resident that's coming to rotate, they're not kind to the nursing staff or like they expect the nurses to kind of like do things for them. I'm like, no, that's not how this runs. You respect every single person here, whether they're cleaning the rooms or they're your nursing staff or their family members. That is the thing that makes a good doctor.
I
Are those
love
things.
that answer so much. My mom always raised me to treat the custodian the same way you would the
Yes.
president. So often you see people kind of elevate their ego with
Mhm.
their position and That's good. I feel like your message is so universal that to be an emergency room doctor, you're going to learn the medicine. And it's the same when I had student teachers. You're going to
Hmm.
learn the subject matter, but the being kind, the showing up,
Hmm.
the discipline that all of that takes, I think is universal for everything in life.
100%. It doesn't matter what you want to do. If you can do those three things, the
Mhm.
rest will kind of fall into place.
Right, right, with enough time and practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What's a case or a patient that just stays with you that you'll never forget?
So I really think a very core part of at least my training or medicine so far was like working through COVID. And I was a resident during this time, and we were in Philadelphia. So obviously, like a pretty large population, like a small area. That was like a true instance of, I think, like we all went into medicine to help people, but like that was the first time that I think a lot of us felt like we were truly putting like our own lives at risk a little bit because, again, we didn't know what was happening. A lot of us quarantined from family for like weeks at a time. Like there were attendings that were living in their basements and not seeing their kids. I was so nervous to or get somebody around me sick. It truly was like a just a time where I think a lot of us were just like kind of just really rocked by the whole situation and like showing up to work and like I there was a shift where I showed up to work and I think six people died that I was taking care of within like 8 hours. Like it was really traumatic. And I don't think a lot of us really got to even process that until really years after because it lasted 2 years. A lot of us just kind of like put our heads down. We're like, okay, this is what's expected of us. Like someone has to take care of these patients and this is what we signed up to do. I think a lot of us didn't really like process all of the trauma that kind of came from that until probably
Mhm.
recently. I mean, I didn't see how it really affected me until probably like a year ago.
That makes sense because it wasn't like it was one day. It was day
Yeah.
after day, and it kept coming at you, and you didn't have time
Hmm.
to pause and really deal with that trauma. So, how do you emotionally survive the trauma and the grief that, I mean, maybe not on a daily basis now, but pretty
Yeah.
regular basis?
I mean, therapy helps. Like I said,
Mhm.
I mean, it's just because, yeah, it's hard to sometimes go from like just another shift, like a patient unfortunately died and we informed the family and then like within 5 minutes I was on to see my next patient, right? So like how can you quickly just like switch your mindset from going to be delivering that horrible news to then kind of going on about your day, right? And like not letting that like pull you over into the next patient. I think a lot of ER doctors unfortunately probably like compartmentalize their emotions a little bit, and I think you kind of have to. I think it's part of longevity of the career and being able to do it for so long as you do have to just kind of like if something happens, you kind of like just put it away for a second and you just are like, okay, I have to move on. And you do have to just be mindful and give yourself that time later, whether it's later in the shift or a debrief with like the staff. If something,
Mhm.
just sometimes that like debrief is helpful, but you do have to give yourself that time to process because I unfortunately lost my aunt to COVID, and even every year, like I still think about it. I'm like, oh, that was like horrible to lose a family member and then like go to work and then still see that right in front of you. It was really horrible and I still feel like I I processed that a little bit. Yeah, I think you have to compartmentalize a little bit, but then give yourself time to then feel everything so you don't like let it just build up.
I think in my career, I also had to, but it's interesting to listen to you right now because if I went through something like the death of my grandma and getting that phone call while I was teaching, I came back after her funeral, even the day of her funeral, because my students cared so much and they, even though I had to compartmentalize it and be on and teach them, but I also got to like be real with them and I could
Mhm.
share those and we had that environment that was caring of each other. Where
Yeah.
as an emergency room doctor, you don't have that. You can't go into the patient who's there with a fever or pneumonia or something and say, "Oh my gosh, I just lost a patient," and you know,
Right.
grieve through that. So it yeah, is on such an elevated version that you deal with every day. Hmm.
Yeah.
When you sit with people on what might be the worst day of their life, because like you said, you have to inform family that a loved one just passed. What has that taught you about what really matters in life?
I think those conversations, they do get easier, but like we have to get taught how to have those conversations because they're not easy. I think the biggest thing is just like trying to be respectful and just give that family time. Like even if there are patients that need to be seen, like if I were in their position, I would want the physician, I know it seems simple, but like to sit down, right? Like don't stand and like don't have your arms crossed. Like a lot of it is like kind of like body language and just letting them kind of like feel everything, ask questions, and not just try and like rush yourself out of the room. So, really slowing down a ton, being very clear with your communication, not like dancing around the subject. They tell us very clearly, like, don't use a word of like, oh, they're no longer with us or something like that. You have to be very clear, like they died. And sometimes that's really hard to say, but you have to be clear in these conversations because sometimes that happens where people don't understand or people get really angry, which is a very understandable emotion to feel during that time. But like, you just have to kind of let people have those feelings, and just giving them the space to do that, I
Mm-hmm.
think is the most important when delivering that kind of news.
And I'm sure it takes intention because you are busy and you have this list of things you have to accomplish. But I'm sure you're amazing at just remembering how real that is for people. And
Hmm.
so you are always so competitive. You're driven. You have to be where you are right now.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with moments when you realize that you can't save everyone?
That's that's probably the hardest. Especially, like, everyone I think that, like, gets into med school is obviously, like, very competitive. We don't like to lose, but, especially, like, to lose a patient, you, like, will leave and you'll kind of like, "What should I have done? Like, could I have done anything different?" Right? You'll start, like, Monday morning quarterbacking and being like, "Oh, I should have done that. I should have done this." The way that I've kind of gotten through that is, like, again, giving myself time to kind of, like, debrief, really think about what happened, and then write down some things that, okay, if this were to happen again, maybe what would I do differently? Unfortunately, people are going to pass, and sometimes the outcome is going to be that, whether you were there or not. And so you really have to try and not place blame on anything and just learn, try and see how you can improve the next time. So, like, if it does happen, maybe the outcome wasn't what you expected, but, like, as long as you leave the case being like, "I did everything that I could do," that's the only way you're probably gonna feel, like, some solace after something
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm. What do you think the quiet cost of your career that no one really talks about?
I think it's probably just, like, the emotional toll that sometimes we will carry, and I don't like I know trauma is, like, a big thing, but, like, there is some trauma from, like, what we do, especially, like I said, I do still think I hold on to some of that, like, through the COVID, days that we worked through. I think a lot of us probably end up maybe taking some of that home with us. So I think some of us will realize that either the time that we might spend with our families after some of these, like, bad shifts, they can kinda, like, seep into your life, and so you have to have a way to be able to manage that because relationships will absolutely be tested for after some of the shifts that we have, or especially like over time if you have like a stretch of longer shifts and you're not taking care of yourself, and you're going to be in a bad mood, and then your family's going to see that, right? And like it's not fair to show up like 100% for work but not be able to show up 100% at home for people. So I think that's probably the biggest toll that I see, is just like an emotional toll.
Mhm, which is
Yeah.
can be exhausting and could lead to burnout if you don't
Yeah.
handle it properly, yeah. I think sometimes people, and this can go back to a high school student even, just are afraid to make connections with people, and they wanna just sit and get information poured into and not really participate, or it might make them feel awkward or uncomfortable to kinda push out of that comfort zone. So, do you remember any time in my classroom, any classroom, in high school or in college, where it just makes more sense now that you're like, "Don't just sit and get."
It goes back to my ultrasound guided IVs. I watched as many videos, people told me over and over again how to do it, but, like, it didn't matter because I still was missing them. I just had to do it. You just have to put yourself in that uncomfortable position and fail until you don't fail. I mean, it's scary to fail, but once you do it once or twice, then you're like, "Eh." You make it to the other side and you're like, "Okay, it's fine. The world didn't end."
Mhm, mhm. Okay, final question.
Okay.
If you could speak directly to someone who is listening right now And maybe they feel behind or scared or unsure of what's next or what they're going through right now, whether it's a job, a relationship, anything. What would you tell them?
It's probably not gonna be the last time you feel this way, unfortunately, but I think that is absolutely natural, and what that probably tells you is that you are ready for something else. You're ready for the next step, right? So if you feel uneasy or uncomfortable or not happy where you are right now, all it takes is sitting down, figuring out even just small changes that you can make. And then once you kind of start making those small changes, you get into like a little bit of a snowball effect and you start seeing how those changes are helpful or are improving you. And then you're like, okay, now I want more. I think just first acknowledging that you have those feelings of discomfort or unhappiness, and then sitting down to be like, okay, how can I actively change these? And then just taking those small steps to do them.
Mhm. I love it. Great job.
Yeah.
As we go through journeys in life, whether it is a weight loss journey, going to college, finding a soulmate, we realize that it isn't just a start here and get to the final destination, that there's so much in that middle that isn't linear, but growth and growing pains shape us. Chanel reminds us that the qualities we admire most in others, discipline, courage, purpose, resilience, don't suddenly just appear in adulthood. They are practiced quietly in classrooms, in long nights, in invisible choices, in moments where no one is clapping. And maybe that's the real part of this conversation, to stop waiting to become someone else and to start showing up fully as who you already are, because presence isn't a personality trait, it's a
Mhm.
life skill. And the life you want is being built in the way you show up today. I'm Carrie Helmer, and this is Project You 2.2, where we don't chase the next version of ourselves. We become them one choice at a time. If this episode stirred something in you, or if you're standing at a crossroads or in that long, messy middle, or quietly wondering who you're becoming, this is the work I do. You can find me at Project You 2.2. And until next time, stay present, brave, as you keep choosing the life that brings you joy. Chanel, thank you so much for
Mhm.
this time, this conversation, and just for me to be able to see that smile again.
Mhm.
So wonderful.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to be a part of this, and this was my first podcast, so I'm
Yay.
so happy to have done it with you.
My first student, I know. I told you as I was making that, I'm like, it's naturally Chanel. So
Oh,
thank you. You made
well,
it.
that was so nice. I made it.
Yay.
You know what I was thinking about the other day?
What?
When you just are like, I saw a photo. Landon, I held Landon in the hospital when he was a baby, and now he is in college.
Mhm.
That's insane.
Mhm.
That's insane.
Yeah, how many years ago did you graduate? Was it, it's almost 20, isn't it?
It had to have been, it was like 16 years ago. I graduated in 2008, so that's
Oh, mhm.
17 years ago, right? Oh my
Yeah,
God, 18 years ago.
almost 18.
Yeah, that's crazy. I still feel like, I don't know, I'm 18 sometimes, you know?
Mhm. I'm
It's
54, and
crazy.
sometimes I do too. Until you talk to an 18-year-old, and then you're like, "Well, okay, I guess I have,
Yeah, you're like,
I
"Eh, you're
have
kinda young,
evolved."
yeah."